What's up, Detroit? We are back with the Riles and Riley Rundown. I'm here with Brendan Riley, as always. This week we are previewing the Lions versus Minnesota in Minnesota.
Guess what? Once again, it's an important game.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it this time because I don't want to.
Though, I think this one is about as important as it gets the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Because you lose to Minnesota. I mean, we've been saying you lose and you're out. But you win, and you actually, I believe if you win this week, you take a step into the wild card.
You're tied with, depending on what Seattle does.
And we mentioned for our post game last that you really are looking like you're in the playoff picture. So every game is big from here on out.
Yeah. All right,
we'll start with the three keys like we always do.
Yep, go ahead. You can go first.
My number one key is going to be keep the passing attack going. Minnesota's really been struggling on the run defense as of late. And the Lions have done quite the opposite and picked up their running game as of late. So I think the Lions will manage 100 yards, which you really don't need more than that from the Lions on the run offense.
No.
So keep the passing attack the way it's going. Keep the momentum going. Take advantage of a fairly weak defense.
Yep. My key for this one is going to be the defense. The defensive line in particular. Adrian Peterson has actually been blowing up the last few weeks. I want to be the team that actually shuts him down. I don't know if that's quite possible if we can shut Adrian Peterson down, but I would like to see him. I wouldn't even mind if he gets 100 yards. Just keep him out of the end zone. I mean, I'd like,
or even if he gets one touchdown,
right? I just like to see
as long as you make Christian Ponder beat you.
I just like to see him contain him a little bit. I mean. It's at the point of the season right now where this is where your defense is going to start getting tested when we start getting the better running backs and quarterbacks in the league.
Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt. This is going to be a tough part of the season.
Yeah. So my number one key is get the defensive line, keep it rolling.
My number two key is going to be keep the turnovers down. Mostly because I believe it was last week we checked to see. No, it was Philly who had lost 4 in a row. I think Minnesota's been struggling as of late too, and. They got one of the greatest, if not the greatest, running back in the game currently in Adrian Peterson, like you just mentioned. But their passing offense has definitely slowed down, and it was never strong. And luckily for Lions fans, Percy Harvin is not expected to play.
Yep.
Who else do they have as a wide receiver threat? I don't even know their number 2 wide receiver's name.
Right.
Is Bernard Berrien still there? I don't know.
I really don't know. Toby Gerhart.
Toby Gerhart's a fullback.
He's a running back in their situation, though, when Adrian Peterson goes down.
No, but I'm talking about the number 2 receiver because Percy Harvin's down.
I got you. Receiver-wise, I have no idea. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so keep the turnovers down because I don't personally believe that if you don't turn the ball over, I don't – and I mean once. If you don't turn the ball over once, I don't think Minnesota's going to beat you.
Right.
Because they're going to have a tough time scoring a lot of points.
Yep. My number 2 key is going to be – back on the defense again, as I always say, win the turnover battle. And this time,
I was waiting for that one.
This time I mean it more than ever. I think last time we played Minnesota, that was the first time I started this turnover key thing.
4 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, and it was when we played Minnesota the first time, and it was when Christian Ponder only had 1 interception. I think he had like almost. And
that was in Ford Field.
Yeah, it was almost 1,000 yards and 1 interception. Well, he had about 1,000 yards on the season. Through week 4.
Oh my gosh, I was like, what?
Yeah.
I think he had about 100 yards in the game.
No, he had about 1,000 yards going into that game on the season and 1 interception. 4 weeks later, he's at 2,393 yards and 8.
No, their passing attacks really slowed down in the last few weeks, and that's why I've said turnovers as well.
Right, and he's at 8 interceptions now, which is a pretty big turnaround as far as him struggling. And there's a lot of questions with him right now too. I mean, I guess something with his dating life or something is going on to where they're thinking that might be his problem, but. Yeah, for going from 1 interception to 8 interceptions in 4 weeks, that shows that team's starting to fall apart.
And we'd like to be looked. They have a tough schedule, but my third key is going to be keep Jared Allen in check. They have a good defensive line, another top notch defensive line. Jared Allen is the only person on that defensive line who really personally scares me. You keep him away from Stafford, you should keep him upright for a good part of the game. And I really feel if you like every week, of course, but I really feel this week if you can focus on all 3 of those keys, you got an easy win.
Michael Jenkins, I'm sorry that I didn't know that you were Minnesota's second receiver.
Was he an Ohio State Buckeye?
Ohio State Buckeye, repping right there.
Is that him? Because I know there's a corner, Michael Jenkins, who also was an Ohio State
it's Michael
Buckeye.
Jenkins, the receiver, right there. right behind Percy Harvin. But here's the difference: Percy Harvin has 677 yards on the season. Michael Jenkins has 295. So it seems like Christian Ponder really focuses in on Percy Harvin. So let's shut down Percy Harvin.
And if Jenkins becomes the number one wide receiver, which is expected as of right now,
right?
The Lions got cornerbacks who can keep up with Michael Jenkins.
Yeah.
I expect to see the Lions bring a little bit of pressure then, actually, if you don't see Harvin's on the field.
Yeah, my third key, Stafford's done a really good job of spreading the ball around this year, although I'm going to change it up a little bit. My third key is for him to get a touchdown to somebody other than Calvin Johnson, and I want to see him kind of blow up on this defense. I mean,
We've been saying that a lot this year.
Yeah, we've been saying...
But, we've seen it 2 weeks in a row, really. Maybe not blow up, but we've seen great performances.
Right. He's throwing for the yards, and that's a lot of the reason as to why people are saying that Stafford's having a down year is because he's not getting the touchdowns, which is true.
The team really... He's not getting the deep touchdowns that he was last year, but the team seems very, very consistent with the idea they want to run the ball when they get into the red zone. We're
on pace. Last year we had... let me get this straight. Right now we are at 8 rushing touchdowns on the season this year. Last year we finished the season with, I believe, 9. If I'm not
no, we seem very, very sure that we want to run the ball when we get into the red zone, which is also why we're not seeing Calvin get as many.
Yep.
And of course that has to do. We're hearing more and more about his injury coming out. He says he feels better. I hope that's the case.
Yep. It's kind of scary what's going on with him, honestly. He's saying that he's working through concussions and nerve damage right now. The Lions are saying no, he never had a concussion.
Well, that's because if they come out and say yes, he did have a concussion, then they get fined for letting him play.
Right. Okay. We have 12 touchdowns on the season right now, rushing, and last year we had a total of 10.
We have 12 right now.
Yes, because I forgot Stafford's touchdowns too that have been rushing. He's got 4 of them.
That's the other thing that people don't give credit to Stafford. I know his numbers don't look great,
right?
But what's his passing touchdown to interception ratio as of right now?
Now we are at 8 touchdowns, and
I believe the picks are below that.
Yeah, I believe he has 7 picks.
All right, so that's not a good ratio.
Right.
But you add those other 4, so 12 to 7 still. Your interceptions are still a little too high.
The interceptions came in the first few weeks.
Right, you're right. So 7 interceptions. Yeah. You got 7 interceptions in. How many? You threw 3 week 1 and 2 week 2?
Well, the funny part
is, 3 actually.
Looking at these splits right here, in the wins, he has 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. In the losses, he has 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So maybe we want him to throw a little bit more interceptions.
Oh, but
but it's just one of those. We've been saying it, like Brendan said, we've been saying it all year. We do want to see him bust out in one of these games and have like an Aaron Rodgers performance or a Peyton Manning performance where he throws for 300.
But who knows if they're going to let him do that? That's my only thing.
Exactly.
Because you can't hold it against him when every time they get into scoring position, they run the ball.
Right. And honestly, it might be that Stafford shot himself in the foot a little bit at the beginning of the season. Because, we were talking about it earlier in the season.
I wondered about that myself, but I wasn't going to say anything because I personally believe it has a little more to do with the whole Calvin thing.
Yeah.
Because with Calvin as an option, there honestly were multiple times you'd see Stafford look to other options, but if there wasn't, he would throw it to Calvin.
It might have to do with the Pettigrew thing, too, seeing as though Pettigrew has no hands right now. And usually when you get in the red zone, that's when you start looking for your tight ends. And since Pettigrew can't catch, that could be a huge reason as to why we aren't running passing plays as much down in the red zone. But, when you've got something that's working like LeSure and Bell coming out of the backfield, you might as well just ride it until it dies. I don't know for a fact, but I would say in the past couple of weeks we've probably been about 195% in the red zone scoring. Joyke Bell and McCullough.
We've been good at scoring in the red zone. We've kicked a lot of field goals, but Jason Hansen definitely slowed down. I would guess he's no longer on that record pace he had going for a while.
Exactly,
which is important. You don't want to have a record in field goals. I don't believe that's generally a good thing.
Right. But looking, there's not too much to look at this. I'm going to throw in another key here, actually. Don't let Jared Allen kill us this time.
No, that's the same thing.
He has been the lion killer for the last, 4 or 5 years now?
He's always been a trash talker big time. Too.
Yeah.
Of Detroit, that is.
Yeah, and I would really like to see Sue come out of this game and be the one that everybody's talking about. Not for a penalty. Don't take this as go out there and stomp on somebody.
I heard a really interesting point. Stu was voted for the second year in a row the most dirty player in the NFL.
Yep.
I'm going to ask right now, how many penalties do you think he's got? He's got
one penalty for an encroachment, for a 5-yard penalty.
And if you were to just base it off of what you've seen, you may guess that because if you watch the lines a lot, you notice he hasn't been penalized. But going into this year, if you said 8 games in, how many penalties would Sue have?
Yep.
He'd probably say at least 8.
Well, one thing I really like too is after that Jay Cutler hit, a lot of people on ESPN and everybody were thinking about, everybody's going to come out and trash him like crazy. No, a lot of people in the NFL stepped up and defended Sue and said straight up that was a good hit. Yes, he does push it over the line a few times.
Hopefully we don't see him. Hopefully we don't see him take a step back. But to be honest, if you wouldn't mind pulling up Sue's stats, he hasn't been the rookie that we saw.
Right.
But it's insane to expect more than. I mean, it is insane to expect more than 10 sacks a year. And I think he's probably got a shot at it this year still. Well, he might be behind pace to do it, but I believe he's got a shot at it.
Yeah, well, hopefully he just doesn't play Jay Cutler anymore because it seems like everything goes around Jay Cutler, which who cares because he's going to cry about anything. So, but pulling up Sue's stats right now, we are at... Impossible to find. Okay, there we go. 12 solo tackles.
Only 3.5 sacks. It's a little low.
Yeah,
it puts you on pace for
probably about 7.
7.
Yeah, 7.
7 for a defensive tackle is not a bad number. No, it's not an elite number. But I mean, all that takes is one big game where he puts up 2 or 3 sacks, and that changes everything.
Yep. Yards lost on sack, 37 though, so that shows that he's one of the quickest tackles in the league.
He's chasing guys around.
Yeah, and think about the guys he's played so far. Mike Vick, crazy escape.
We have seen some mobile quarterbacks. There's been mention that we haven't played the best quarterbacks, and we haven't, but we have seen some mobile quarterbacks.
Yep. And he's got 5 tackles for loss this year too, which is crazy.
No, Sue, and people don't give him the credit. Honestly, if I had to, I wish we would have done this, and I mean, it's up to you. Maybe we could work this in. I would have liked to do it in the last show, and we looked ahead, do some midseason grades.
Yeah.
You want to do that? Maybe just a couple key players. We won't do it on everybody.
One really good thing I want to point out, though, is this team's really balanced right now. Kyle Vandenbosch, 3.5 sacks. Cliff Averill, 4.5 sacks. And Ndamukong Suh, 3.5 sacks. Nick Fairley, 1.5. Corey Williams, 2. I mean,
and then you got some linebackers got some.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's really good to have your whole defensive line above 1 sack. I mean, that shows everybody's getting to the quarterback.
And there are plenty of backup defensive tackles who aren't going to.
We'll start with the obvious one.
Let's do the big key. So Matt Stafford, halfway point. What do you give him?
Right now, I'm going to give him a B minus, just because of the fact. I mean, coming from your elite quarterback, if he so wants to be elite quarterback, which he's gonna be elite, it's just gonna take some time. I would like to see the touchdowns go up. I mean, 8 touchdowns through 8 games is.
I was personally thinking somewhere around there, but I'm gonna go with the C plus. And here's how I'm doing that: is I'm C's average, right? So we'll say C's about 15. I think he is probably just outside of the top 10 right now. Not by much, as far as how he's played, not his talent.
The main reason why I gave him a B minus is because, yes, he's got 8 touchdowns, which isn't what we want to see, but he is still on track to throw for about 4,800 yards this season.
No, a B minus is a reasonable number. And if I had to be perfectly honest and I had to predict his end of the season, I
think he can still get up to
I think this is going to be a 9-win team, and I think we're going to see an evolution.
Yeah,
and I mean it. I still don't think we're going to make the playoffs. I think we got a shot. I do think 9-7 gives you a chance.
Yep.
But I do think we're going to really see this team grow up this year. Yeah. And I think we're going to be a force to be reckoned with next year, especially if we miss the playoffs.
Let's narrow this next one down. Running backs on Detroit, because I mean we do use 3.
No, you're right. You're right.
Or 2 technically. But
I'm okay with doing that as well.
I'm gonna give them an A. I mean, they have done exactly what we wanted our running game. I mean, Detroit has always said since Barry left, we need a running game. This is the best running game that you've had since Barry left. I mean, you don't have Javid Best, which you would like, which you can basically kiss Javid Best goodbye. But Mikel LeSure, he's got 375 yards in 5 games. What is that? 4 touchdowns now.
Here's what I'm going to have to say. I'm going to give 2 grades on that. If you want to go by what this team needs, A+++++. I mean, you really couldn't ask for a whole lot more out of your running backs.
Yep.
I mean, what's our yards a game? Probably just shy of 100.
Yeah, just shy of 100. We are at
as a team. Yeah,
yards a game, 100 point. They're 103.6.
So just over 100.
So yeah,
and you really couldn't ask for more than that from this team.
Yep.
Now, if you want to go by the rest of the league standards, which is what I'm going to give my grades on, I'll give them a B.
Yep.
They've had a solid showing.
Well,
definitely room to improve, but nothing to complain about.
one thing I like, what the NFL compares or likes to talk about in the running game is if you can keep that 3 to 3.5 yards per carry.
The 3's a little low. 3.5 to 4, I would say.
But 3 to 3.5 is what they show it at as an average quarter or running game. We've got 4.1 yards a game, so we're actually on the higher level of the 4 or 3.5 to 4 anyway. So, I mean, when you've got Joique Bell coming out of the backfield, Mikel LaShore, and both those guys are dual threats. I mean, receiving-wise, they're the exact same thing. So.
Yeah, that's actually, I was thinking about that too, which could push them to a B+ in my other one, because they do have the receiving talents. Let's move on. Do you want to do receivers as a whole? Or
we're going to do two
Megatron.
Yeah, let's do two receivers. We're going to do receivers and Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson-wise, I got to give him a C right now. I mean, he just doesn't look like himself, and I'm not putting anything against the guy. I mean, this injury that he's been talking about seems really serious. I mean, he's saying he's not feeling anything in his hands, which is complete. Honestly, if you're a Lions fan, that could be a little scary.
No, it's very scary the first time I heard that.
Yeah,
he does claim that he's come back, and I don't think he would have mentioned. I really don't believe he would have mentioned it if he still wasn't feeling his hands. I think he would be very careful to mention that to anybody.
I also want to throw out that it seems like Calvin Johnson, whoever's hitting Calvin Johnson, is getting away with a lot of penalties that would.
It's one of those things where when a guy is a physical freak, you're allowed to get away with more.
Exactly,
it's not fair.
You've got the play last week that knocked. Who's the receiver that got knocked out of the game last week?
Victor Cruz.
Victor Cruz. Yeah, that exact same play happened when we played Minnesota to Calvin Johnson. There was no penalty or anything.
No, there was a penalty. It was a late called penalty, but there was a penalty. But no, that's what happens when a guy's a physical freak. They let you get away with more physical play, which isn't fair.
Right.
But no, I agree. I'm going to give Calvin Johnson a B- because yardage wise, here's a really, really interesting stat that I heard the other day. Larry Fitzgerald has, and don't look these numbers up. Larry Fitzgerald has about 35 to 40 more targets than Calvin Johnson.
Yep.
Where do you think the yardage is between the two of them?
Calvin's probably blowing him out.
Calvin's blowing him out.
Yeah, because Larry Fitzgerald's
40 less targets.
Yeah.
And when it comes to touchdowns, he hasn't been targeted as much in the end zone as he was. He had one or two really bad drops.
Yep.
But for the most part, he hasn't been targeted like he was. So
he's been targeted 82 times and he's caught 48, which definitely is not like Calvin.
Some of them are bad throws too. They're not all
exactly.
drops. But like I said, I'll give him a B-. There's definitely room to improve for him. You expect him to be an A+.
Yep.
You could very reasonably make a C+. I think lower than that, you're being a little harsh on the guy who top 5 in the league in yards.
Well, you got to think for Calvin Johnson right now, everybody's saying that we're not going downfield and stuff. He's still got 15 catches of over 20 yards.
He's doing a lot of catching and running this year, which he did in his younger days.
And if you think about it, I mean, there are probably about, if Calvin's 100%, there's probably about 4 or 5 touchdowns you can add on.
Yep, I completely
agree. You had 2 drops in the end zone a couple weeks ago. You had the 1 drop in Chicago when it was a wide open catch. You had the one last week. You can't blame him because he got tackled at the 1 yard line, but
you know what? The catch last week, I think if it was a healthy Calvin, I don't think there's any doubt he would have scored.
I don't think so either because he looked slow.
He looked very hesitant.
We each texted each other that right after that play that he did not look himself.
I personally didn't think he looked slow as much as he looked very careful.
Yep.
And before he would go into guy full force, he looked like he was trying to make sure he didn't take any big hit. But now receivers as a whole, they've saved themselves the last 2 weeks. I'm going to give them a C-.
Yeah.
I think they've saved themselves the last 2 weeks because Ryan Broyles has showed up. Titus Young had a good week. Pettigrew didn't have it. And we're going to include the tight ends in that.
Yeah. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to give the receiving crew as a whole a C+. Brandon Pettigrew, you're getting an F. I'm sorry. This is the worst. You have the yards, but you have the worst hands I've ever seen out of a wide receiver / tight end in the league. I mean, this is awful.
You know what, though? We've seen a lot more out of everybody the last 2 weeks, so hopefully that keets up.
Yeah.
So that
besides Pettigrew, though.
You know what, though? Pettigrew had a good game 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You forget about that one because you haven't mentioned it much. You were trashing him in the post game last week, too, because he had a bad week. But 2 weeks ago, he showed up. But we'll move on to defense. You want to just do it as
Yeah, we'll do a defensive whole.
So we'll do defensive line.
Yeah. I'm giving the defensive line an A. I mean, everybody's been talking down on them the entire season. I love what our defensive line has done so far. I mean, you've got Sue, Averill. I mean, Averill hasn't really performed to the point of a superstar like he wants his contract to be, but he's definitely the type of guy who is playing up to speed with the rest of the defensive line.
if you're looking to re-sign Cliff Averill, this year's probably helping you. I have a hard time believing someone's going to be willing to give him the contract that he wants now. But as a defensive line whole, I can't give them an A. I'll give them a B+. I agree with you. I think the line that we have gotten the sacks, maybe not top in the league, but we've gotten sacks. The run defense is worlds beyond where it was any of the last couple of years.
Yep.
And that's going to limit your sacks. It is. I mean, if you really look at it, we've played AP once. We've played Frank Gore, Steven Jackson. We've played some top running backs.
Just to go back real quick, I completely failed to mention this. The receiving grade could completely go up in the next few weeks, too,
I agree.
adding Mike Thomas. Because I completely forgot. We have a threat now on both sides of the ball with Calvin and Mike Thomas, and you're going to start seeing...
And Pettigrew and Young, or sorry, not Pettigrew, Broyles and Young have stepped up.
You're going to start seeing Broyles and Young probably get a lot more action, honestly, because you're going to have to put...
If he's not picked up in your fantasy league yet, I'd take a look at Broyles.
Yeah.
So in the last 3 weeks he's put up in my league, which isn't quite standard scoring, but very similar. I believe it was 12 week 1, 18 week 2, and 15 week 3.
Yep. And
no, you're right. I agree. I think most of these grades are going to step up.
Right. But going back to the defense...
So we'll go to linebacker group now.
Yeah. And one thing I also want to say, as far as defense goes... I would like to see a few more, maybe forced fumbles on the season. I mean, we've only had 3 forced
turnovers
fumbles.
altogether. You would like to see step it up.
Yeah. But going to the linebackers, they haven't been as dominant as they were last year. I mean, last year it was
what I want to say with the linebackers. You're not noticing them as much.
Last year it was all Tulloch.
I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the defensive line has stepped up their run game.
Yep. I agree with that.
I'm going to have to give them a B because I don't know what they're doing, to be honest.
Right. You're not seeing the teams break runs
outside
like they were last year.
And when they do, as much as it's not a good thing, when they're breaking deep, big runs to the outside, and when that tells you they're outrunning you, that's going to happen sometimes. You don't want it to happen often, of course.
Right.
What's really frustrating is when you see a guy break the middle for 80 yards.
Yeah. Because
that means, the 2 defensive tackles should have had him, at least 1 or 2 linebackers should have had him, and 1 of the safeties should have had him.
Yep.
I can handle runs to the outside much more.
Yeah.
No, you're right, though. For the most part, things aren't breaking to that next level. So I'm going to give our linebackers a B. But to be honest, that has a lot to do with the fact that I don't know what they've done because they haven't been as noticeable this year.
I take that back. We've had 2 big runs all season. One came from Marshawn Lynch a couple weeks ago where he went about 80 yards. And the other one came in week 2 against San Francisco on Frank Gore.
That's actually the only 2 I was thinking of as well.
When Frank Gore rushed
Adrian Peterson might have broken a couple 30, 40-yarders.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and move on to the defensive backs now.
This is a tough grade because they're very weak. But if you want to grade them based on talent, they've done a good job.
Right. I mean, based on what you thought...
I'm going to give 2 grades.
I'm going to go here. I'm going to go based on what you expected from the cornerback play and the safety play going into the season. What would you give them? I'm going to go B-.
I'm going A+.
Yeah, that's...
So, okay, let's put it this way. That's actually not a fair statement. Going into the season, I expected to have Drayton Florence as well. And I thought that Drayton Florence and Chris Houston would be good enough 1 and 2s.
Drayton Florence will be back this week.
Right. So I'm going to take Chris Houston completely separately. Chris Houston, I'm going to give a B+. As far as what I expected and what he's done. He's done a little more than I expected. He's actually been pretty good.
Yep.
And he's been pretty good altogether. As far as...
Bill Bentley, I like what I see from Bill Bentley.
I do too, but isn't he done for the season?
He is, but I really liked what I saw from Bill Bentley when he was in. I mean, it...
And you know who really seems to step it up the last couple weeks is Jonte Green.
So the guy who we picked up off the practice squad that we were both questioning that first week that we saw him,
Silva. Very good.
Silva has been one of
I've always liked Silva.
Yeah.
I wasn't upset that they picked up Silva.
It was just weird.
I was upset that they signed him less than 24 hours before a game they started him for.
Definitely, yeah.
But then I took a little more time to think about it and realized they probably practiced him with the starting team and didn't make it official so as to throw everybody off. But no, he seems to grow leaps and bounds every game. I'm not saying he's starter necessarily, but he looks like he's got legitimate backup potential.
No, I completely agree.
And I think we can do one more final grade. Although I didn't do my. What did you give your cornerbacks?
B-.
B-. As a whole corner, I'm gonna go same B-.
Yeah. We got to do one more.
Special teams all together.
Got to go Jason Hansen. 70 points on the season, as always. Going to lead the team in scoring again, which is weird. Yeah. I mean, as far as defensive special teams, probably an F, I would say. Maybe even lower.
I'm going to go with special teams as a whole, and I'm going to go with the D- because, like you said, Jason Hansen's been a stud.
Yeah.
I'm going D- because they've picked it up the last few weeks.
Like I said, I'm going kicking game wise. I'm giving him an A plus because Jason Hansen's just who he is.
So
return team
but they've stepped it up. They have. We haven't
Yeah.
even seen a big return in a few weeks.
Yeah.
But when you give up four returns,
this is the week where we get to see if
Percy Harvin's there. If he's not there, then you shouldn't.
Exactly. But I mean,
if he's there, I refuse to kick to him. I kick the ball out of bounds before I give the ball to Percy Harvin. Of course, I don't want to kick it out of bounds, but I would not letting him return the ball. So I think for the most part we've wrapped up this game pretty well.
Yep.
We also obviously did some of the postseason grades.
Yep.
You know, if you're listening to this, feel free to give us your postseason grades. I'd like to hear some of them.
Yeah. So for Brendan Riley, this is Tommy Riles, and hopefully we get another win this week, push us over 500, and start our playoff run now. So for everyone in Detroit, go Lions.